Hi, Al. I thought I would pop in and talk to you a little about the concept of context. Context. Chapter 1 of our text does really focus on the concept of context. When we think of that term context, we're really talking about all those surrounding influences that come together to shape a child's behavior, to affect a child's development. And those contexts can affect behavior in the moment, but context can also have a lasting effect and shape who we are, our sense of self-esteem, our sense of self-worth, the way we interact with the world, uh, all can be affected by the surrounding context that a child is exposed to, right? When you think of the major context that children are exposed to, the family itself is a major influence on a child. Uh, and that family can be made up of different structures. It could be maybe a family where there's just a single mom. Maybe there's been a recent divorce in the family. Maybe that child lives in a family with not just mom and dad, but grandma and the tia. Uh, Maybe the child lives in a home where there's abuse and neglect, where that child is being abused. Maybe they're living in a home where there's a parent who is just been recently laid off their job. Maybe they're living in a home where there's a lot of argument between mom and dad. Maybe they're living in a home where there's someone in the family who has a major illness. Maybe the child himself has some kind of a condition, maybe an illness, a chronic illness, or a special need, perhaps autism, attention deficit, anxieties. All those are going to affect the way that child is at the moment. It also is going to take a lasting effect on that child. And it's going to express itself later on, how that child interacts with the world, the child's sense of self-esteem, value as an individual, the choices they make. So these early experiences really do have a profound impact on the ultimate development of the child. Some of those really common contexts for the child, obviously, are family structure, the school the child's living in. Right now with the COVID situation, that's another context that is affecting a child. That normal pattern of going to school with the teacher, that's been interrupted. Going to school where they're interacting with their friends and peers and connecting and laughing and scratching with their friends, that's been interrupted, right? Anxiety around getting the virus, the concern of that, all of those are contexts that can go into affecting the child. So it can be the home, it can be outside the home, school, friends, right? And then the parents' life, the world of the parents also comes in and affects the child. What goes on in that parent's life outside the home is brought into the home and affects that child in the home. What goes on in the parent's workplace can come in and affect the child's home. If mom or dad at work, if there's a lot of stress at work, maybe mom and dad bring that stress at home. Mom and dad maybe recently got laid off their job. That's going to affect the way that child is in the home, right? That's going to affect that child's own sense of stress and well-being. So we're surrounded by these contexts. Some of them are transitory, and that means they kind of are at the moment, but some of them are lasting. Things like your race, your ethnicity, the neighborhood you live in. Some of these can change though. For example, the neighborhood, perhaps your parents get higher paying jobs and you move to a different neighborhood. Maybe you started out in a neighborhood with very low income, where you were surrounded by poverty, you were maybe surrounded by gang violence, you were surrounded by drug abuse, there was a lot of stress in your environment, and perhaps your parents moved out of that neighborhood into a neighborhood of a higher, what we call socioeconomic status. So I do want you to just keep in mind that children are really just bathed in all these environmental influences. We never can understand every single influence that shapes a child. But as much as possible, we want to understand and have a sensitivity to the major influences affecting that child. And as much as we can too, if they're having a negative effect on that child, if it's within our control, can we go in and change uh, some of those influences, some of those contexts? Can we make a change? So if we know that the child is living in a home where there's a lot of stress, if we know a child is living in a home where there's abuse and neglect, can we intervene to help that child? Can we mitigate or lessen the effect of some of these contexts? Can we rescue a child from some of these negative contexts? Uh, but we're all a sum total of the experiences we have in life. So in your discussion, I asked you to go back into your own childhood and think of some of the experiences, some of the situations in your early childhood that had a dramatic effect on your development. And also to think of something currently that's had an effect on your development. Maybe you didn't get much sleep last night. Maybe you've got a cold right now. Maybe you're really worried about school right now and you're carrying that stress around. Maybe you just got laid off your job. Maybe you just had a little fight with your boyfriend or girlfriend, right? All those things affect the way we are in the given moment, huh? It doesn't have to be negative though. It can be really positive. Maybe you just won the lottery, right? Maybe you just got a new boyfriend or girlfriend that's making your heart go Peter Pat, right? Maybe you just had a birth of a new child in the family. And that's really exciting and celebrating you. All of these things are surrounding us and affect the way not only we are in the given moment, but they have a lasting effect on us as well. So with context, with children, we want to keep in mind that the major context is the family. So the child lives in the family has immediate connection with mom, with dad, with brother, sister, with friends, right? Then we can move outside of that child's immediate connection. There's a researcher named Brothenbrinder, don't be scared by that name, but he came up with what's called the ecological model. And really, the ecological model does deal with these contexts. He just said children are nested in different social systems. So these social systems are layered. The first innermost layer is that child and his immediate relationships, the child with mom, dad, his friends, his teacher. So the child's immediate experiences, his immediate relationships, that what they call the microsystem. And then these systems expand farther away from the child, but they can still ripple in and affect that child. So think of, say, outside of the home, let's say mom and the teacher have a relationship, okay? Mom tells the teacher about some things that are going on in the home with the child. That can affect the way that the teacher is in the classroom with the child. It could, huh? Let's say the teacher tells the mother something about the way the child is in the classroom. And then that affects the way the mother is in the home with that child. Maybe there's a particular skill that parent is working with in home that the teacher said the child needs a little assistance with. Maybe it's a behavior issue, but the relationship between these two people outside of the child's immediate microsystem that can come in and affect that child. Huh? So that first system is called a microsystem, child's immediate relationships. Then we move a little farther, maybe two or more of the people in that child's immediate microsystem who have a relationship, and that comes in and affects the child. Then we can move out even farther. Let's say mom and dad's place of business. What goes on in mom and dad's workplace can ripple in and affect the way mom and dad are in the home, and that can affect the child. Dad is really stressed at work. He's afraid he's going to lose his job. He brings that home into the home. Maybe he's more angry easier to anger. Maybe he's drinking more and more likely to get a little hot-tempered. Maybe he's more quiet and reserved, not connecting as warmly with the child. So what goes on in the institutions of society, mom and dad's workplace, let's say, can ripple in and affect the child. Right now, we're seeing some parents being laid off their work, and that stress of being laid off, that can definitely affect the family functioning in that child. And even at a larger level, surround our surrounding culture, and think right now what's going on with COVID, and think of like our Congress, our government, some of the new requirements that have been imposed related to COVID, but also some of the interventions that have been imposed to assist families, right? Uh, to, to help families who have been laid off, to help families who can't pay their rent, right? So, but all these go in and have an effect on the child. So what goes on outside that home, those contexts outside the home can ripple in and affect the child. And what goes on inside that home, those immediate relationships the child has, can ripple out into the world. So the ecological model just talks about the child being surrounded by these different social systems that move farther away from the child. But a change in any one of these systems can ripple in and affect the child, or ripple out from the child and affect the surrounding social systems. Okay. So I do want you to have a understanding of that concept of context. And I do want you to think about it in your own life. What's affecting you immediately here, but also think back in your early life. What are some of the contexts? Maybe you weren't even aware of it at the time, but now you think back and oh, my dad was outside of the home a lot. My dad was in the military and not home much, maybe. Maybe my dad was in jail, or maybe my mom was in jail. Maybe mom or dad had a drug problem. Maybe one parent was extremely depressed and that affected the way they interacted with you. Maybe you had to move around a lot. That affected you. So context of behavior. We want to always be sensitive to the context of behavior and as much as possible. Try to understand those contexts and then intercede and try to negate the negative effects of some of these contexts. Okay? So context of behavior.